Hi everybody, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie.
Hello.
Together we're ThinkerThemer, and we are ready to talk about our most anticipated board games of 2025.
Let's go.
And there's already been a lot of announcements actually.
I think it's not going to stop. I think we're going to keep seeing more and more and then going, oh, well, had we known, maybe that would have made it into the
Yeah, and we have lists that have very little crossover. So we're going to talk you through our individual top 10s. But before we get started, I wanted to heed this video with a bit of a cautionary warning that we have not played these games.
None of these games.
None of these games.
Some of them don't even have like much more than 2 lines of a description.
Exactly.
So it's like don't hold us liable.
Yeah, so we revisited our most anticipated games of 2023 to see how that had played out. And a lot of people in the comments were like, see, this is why you can't trust YouTubers. Don't come for us.
Yeah.
We are telling you we have not played these
Yes.
games. So this is usually the thing that's make it onto this list because we're intrigued by the mechanics or the theme, of course, or the designer's done something great in the past that we've loved. So we have no idea how this will shake out, but we're excited to share this list for you. Another little note before we get into it is that we have not included anything that we played last year. And we covered a lot of prototypes that will be released in 2025. We are only talking about things that are truly new to us. So now let's get into the list. Now, before we get into our top 10, there is a game, an honorable mention, that's going to sit outside of our top 10, but not because it's not anticipated, because it's very much anticipated, but because we're probably a little bit biased because the designer is our good friend Candice Harris, who works for BGG, runs the BGG podcast, does videos for BGG. A lot of people would know her because she's just an amazing personality in the hobby and so knowledgeable. And across the 4 years of us making content, she has been so supportive of us, and she always has some kind of gem game to tell us about. So she's a great source of knowledge, and we're excited because she has designed her own game.
Yes, so Rivals of Rock, which is going to be crowdfunding this year. And so it's all about being an up-and-coming band in a small town, and there's this sort of touring rock festival that's coming to town, and so you're trying to make your band be the headlining act for that festival. So in terms of its worker placement, is my understanding, plus different worker types, and you're going to be like recruiting musicians and writing songs, but then you have to match the songs to the different areas or the venues where you're playing different gigs. And then there's also an element of like managing band drama. And so like it sounds really intriguing. Obviously there isn't a lot of information available.
No, but Candice herself is actually a musician.
Yes.
So just like Rock Hard 1977, it's coming from a place of like deep understanding about the theme. But Candice actually has quite heavy taste in games. So I'm really intrigued to see what she does with this theme. Can't wait to check it out. Candice, if you're watching, please let us play your prototype at some time this year. But yeah, we just wanted to put that on our list as our honorable mention. That's Rivals of Rock.
All right, so my number 10 is higher on Amy's list, so we'll talk about it when she reaches that.
Okay, so we'll go straight into my number 10, which is a little bit board game adjacent because it is a new puzzle narrative series by Post Curious, and it's called The Ministry of Lost Things. The first game in that series is called Lint Condition, and I'm really excited by this because if you know Post Curious and Rita Orlov's team and the work they do, you'll know that we really love their puzzles. They have a really strong narrative to them. They're kind of like, the exit escape room style in a box, but much more sophisticated.
So creative.
Yeah, very creative.
Next level.
Yeah, hard puzzles. Like sometimes they take us hours when we're working. Usually both of us plus my sister are sitting there, you know, through these box experiences that can be up to 10 hours plus, like the Emerald Flame. That was a huge one we completed together. But this one is a 2 to 3 hour experience. So more akin to those kind of one and done smaller boxes. And so the puzzles have been made a little bit more accessible, although they still reassure that they're, tricky enough. And I really love the theme of these because they're based on the elusive verse, which is that area where lost things go. And there's an item that might be lost, and basically you're trying to help it get back to its original owner. And so you're trying to piece together all the clues to do that. And when I was reading the description, I was like, well, they just need a Maggie in their life.
Hey, have you seen my fill in the blanks like, yes, it's right next to the this, in this cupboard on the,
Yeah, Maggie has an incredible ability to be the keeper of things.
Sometimes I just have a weird like photographic memory. I'll notice something that is like, oh, that's odd that that's there. Or often I'll be like, I'll put it in the right place, and then Amy will be like, have you seen this? I'm like, where would you expect to find it? It's like, here. It's like, go look.
So smug, so smug.
Although today we had the opposite, where I was like,
Yeah.
I have misplaced this. And Amy was like, I know where it is. It's right here.
So that's the first time in about 12 years that that's ever happened. But generally speaking, you can add something new to a room and I wouldn't notice it for months. So
Yes.
I have
And I have tested
tunnel
this.
vision. I have very tunnel vision for things like that.
Once with a whole hammock. I was like, I wonder how long it'll take before Amy realized there's a whole hammock in this corner of the
Took about a month.
of the house.
It was hidden on a balcony, so anyway, moving right along. So I really love this puzzle style game. That's why it's my number 10, the Ministry of Lost Things series.
Okay, so my number 9 is the game Freyguard by Rainer Knizia, and the publisher is Impatience, who is the team that brought you things like Honorim and Sylvian and all that sort of range of games, which I've really enjoyed as a solo player as well. So this is also a solo-only game, and you're going to be essentially, it's hand management. So you're going to be trying to stave off these wandering castles, kind of like mechanical castles that are attacking the land of Freyguard. And so you'll have a hand of cards, and you can either score like your 3 cards, or you can push your luck to draw a card, discard a card, and try and improve your hand so that you can essentially, sounds like then you will shift to a battle phase afterwards. So there isn't a lot more information around it, but the fact that it's, Rainer Knizia, it's a solo game, it's by a team that is really, really great at doing like those sort of solo puzzly things. So I'm really intrigued.
You also love Push Your Luck. Like,
I
it's weird
surprisingly do.
Yeah, because you're always about risk mitigation.
Yeah.
But you really...
And often it's the same thing with games like Friday, where often I'm too conservative and that's what gets me. So I think maybe the reason I like it is because it's teaching me to take more risks, because you often have to push your luck a bit more to get to a point where you can actually combat or solve whatever the puzzle is.
In a multiplayer game, you also get to be really smug when you're really conservative and everyone else is going bust around you.
Sometimes it pays off, and sometimes you actually do need to, push it a little bit. So that's my number 9, Freyguard.
Now, my number 9 is a game by Vital Lacerda. It is Speak Easy. So this, Vital Lacerda brings out generally one big box game a year. It's almost always illustrated by Ian O'Toole, who I'm always amazed at Ian's range and incredible. Now, often Vital's games are on my most anticipated, and they're almost never on my top games of the year. And the reason for this is I really appreciate the design and the thinking that goes into his titles. They're always really big and sprawling and heavy, and I like exploring that to begin with. They're just not games that we often get off our shelf. And I really these days value accessibility a lot, because we're always teaching as well. I just, a lot of the time you have to commit to a 1 hour kind of, teach for these games. And then the game, we've played them at conventions, and oh my goodness, you sit there for 5 hours.
This is your half a day to like 3/4 of the day taken with this one game.
Yeah.
Also because you often are like, because they don't hit the table that often, you're trying to like get enough people, and then as soon as you get that 4 player, it just blows out.
Anyway, I want to talk about Speakeasy though, because the reason why this one is on my list and I remain optimistic that this will work for us is because it does seem very thematic, but it also seems very smooth in the turns. And one thing I often find about Lacerda games is that they're a little bit clunky or a little bit convoluted in the number of steps. It's like you're trying to work out that you want to achieve A, B, and C. In order to do that, you've got to think back like 10 steps and work your way towards this. Whereas this one seems a little bit more like open, a little bit more like maybe I'll just try doing this and that. The other thing is that the 2 main mechanics in this are worker placement and area control. 2 mechanics that I absolutely adore. I will say that in looking at the rules, it feels a little bit less interactive, even though those 2 mechanics are generally very interactive. It feels like a low interactivity version of those 2 mechanics. But it was very easy to grasp how the game is played just by watching a couple of playthroughs and by reading the rules. So yeah, I was really intrigued by it. I'm not really super keen on that mobster-like setting, but I do really appreciate the componentry that they've used. So the little buildings, little trucks that have little barrels in them are really cute. You've got this vault as well, and so you can collect money normally, but if you collect money it goes directly into your vault. You have to launder it before you can use it, and that costs you 2 to 1. So you're halving the amount of money that comes out of your vault if you want to use it to pay for things. And I really, really love what Ian O'Toole has done with the player board, in that when you slide cards into it, there's this piece of artwork that starts to build this picture on your very plain player board, and then it starts to become really beautiful. So there is a lot of things that intrigue me about this game, and I'm looking forward to playing it. Again, I just hold high hopes that this will be another title that works for us from Vital Lacerda, of which my favorites are really Lisboa and On Mars. But again, they just don't get to the table. So that is why this is my number 9 is Speakeasy.
So my number 8 is the game Sweetlands by Totsuka Chuo, who did games like Perfumery in Ostia. We've played Perfumery and I quite enjoyed it. But this is very different. So Sweetlands is a massive, expensive Euro-style strategy game. The whole thing is like you're kind of building the city in a confectionery world, which I love. So already the theme and the art direction that they've taken, and even the components, immediately pulled me in. And then when I found out like how Euro-y it is and how big a game it is, and there's like tracks to obviously keep track of all sorts of different resource conversion, which I love, and then obviously like gathering stuff to construct buildings. All of these things are things that I enjoy thoroughly, and I've heard from some people that they've really enjoyed the solo mode of this game, so I'm even more excited for what that could be.
All covered in a toffee layer of
Love it.
Sweet goodness.
Best. As someone with a sweet tooth, is like, this is excellent, and I just hope it doesn't then make me, when you see like food stuff, you're like, oh, now I'm hungry. Yeah.
As you play.
Yeah, so hopefully it won't be tempting me too much as I'm playing, going, now I want a cookie. But we'll see. So that's my number 8, Sweetlands.
Now, my number 8 is a game that was just announced that just squeezed into this list in time. My number 8 is Finspan. Now, just like all the people watching at home, when I first heard about Finspan, I thought it was like an April Fool's joke. It was just another meme that was going around. And sure enough, as soon as it was announced, there was all of the memes that were tucked away after Wormspan all came out again.
Yeah.
And, people were having a laugh at, just... another Wingspan stuff.
Another offshoot,
another
Wingspan? Apparently, yes.
Here to say, yes, I do. And the reason is really because of the changes that have been made. Obviously, the main thing is the setting. I actually prefer the idea of having different types of marine life, and specifically fish. There's going to be other marine life in there, but fish is something I've always grown up fishing. I think being by the coast is just part of the Australian way of life. And so I really resonate with that. Yes, I like birds, but I really love this idea of fish. And over the last 3 years of game development, I think they've been working quite closely with a marine biologist. So, to get all that detail in there about the different species, which is what people love about Wingspan. So I'm really excited about that. And now let's talk about it mechanically. So no longer are we building in rows, we're building in columns. That's not the only thing that's changed though.
Yeah.
But we're building in columns, which makes sense because you are going to be using your meeples, which are now divers, to dive down and activate that tableau down each column. And so on your turn, you can of course choose to put another fish into the depths of your tableau, or you can dive down and activate the ones that are already there. And it works a little bit differently in that there are different sections based on the depth where the fish is going to go. Interestingly, there's some pre-printed fish that are on your player board as well that you can cover up. And that idea of what do they call it? The nesting behind cards? Tucking. So they're still tucking, but what's really interesting about this game is that you can always play a fish on top of another fish that is smaller, because that makes sense, because the fish eats the smaller fish. And so you can constantly be changing your tableau in that way. But another interesting element in this game is that they got rid of resources in the way that Wingspan uses resources. And I think that will help the tableau get up and running quicker. I'm not sure, but you don't have to collect resources in order to spend them. What you need to spend is cards that are in your open hand. And that's another interesting element of this game, is that everyone has their hand of fish cards out on the table on their left-hand side of their board. And then as you spend them, usually to put other fish into your tableau, they go onto the right-hand side, which is a discard pile, but you can actually draw back from that discard pile as well. So you're not having to get rid of them completely. Another element of this game is, of course, they still have the eggs. But in this case, the eggs hatch into little schools of fish, or well, they hatch into small fish, which then you can group together as schools of fish to be worth more points. So there's enough mechanically going on here that I think it's going to play a little bit differently.
Yeah, it looks like the flow is quite different.
Yeah, but while still retaining what people love about Wingspan, which is activating that tableau. So I'm really keen to try it. Also feels a little bit more accessible because it feels like there's fewer components that are going in with the lack of the resources and things.
And Elizabeth Hargrave was still involved in the development of it, which I really love to see.
New designers, but Elizabeth Hargrave was still involved. And just really excited to get that to the table. And we'll probably will have an opportunity really soon, because that I believe it comes out January the 22nd. So we won't have to wait too long for that. That is my number 8, Finspan.
Now to my number 7, it's the game Coming of Age by Danny Garcia, who did games like, Windmill Valley, Barcelona, Arborea, which I also really love. More recently, Daitoshi as well. And what else? I feel like I'm missing. There's a lot of games that he's been pumping out. So this one, Coming of Age, is all about the development or growth through life. So it actually starts out when you are a child, and so you're kind of very limited in terms of the agency that you have, the skills and the things that you have access to. But then as you're aging, you're going to be collecting, or essentially like enhancing your ability to essentially be able to ultimately meet your life goals. So it almost feels like this is making into a better, more strategic version of a game of life.
Game of life.
So it's like the game of life, but like, So, and apparently the core mechanic is with this sort of dice, almost like dice placement, action placement, which will then determine kind of like the places that you're going to be able to go to enhance or develop your character. So I'm intrigued by this proposition, because I've really enjoyed Danny Garcia's designs, and also like the theme is quite, very relatable for everyone.
Yeah, relatable theme. I wonder how heavy the game is going to be.
Well, someone asked, and Danny said, I think it's going to be probably a bit heavier, slightly heavier than Windmill Valley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's a nice weight.
That is a nice
like
way.
that, like mid to heavy.
Like we liked Windmill Valley was a great sort of, it was satisfying, great interconnected sort of pieces. It sort of really scratched that Euro strategy itch.
In an hour.
Yeah. So it was very accessible as well. So this is just like a little bit above that. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, so that is my number 7, Coming of Age.
Okay, so my number 7 is the first of many 2-player games that are on my list. This has got to be the year of 2-player games. I don't know what's happened. Why couldn't they have done this when we were in lockdown? Because I needed all those 2-player games back then.
It's like the flow on of the lists about like 2-player games, and even on BGG, like list of recommendations for 2-player games has grown and grown in popularity probably since that time.
And probably also from the, we went to big games, deluxe games, and those are still coming out, but some people just want to have a quick 30-minute experience that's head-to-head, with their partner or friend or whatever, test their relationship. But anyway, back to this game, which I haven't even mentioned the name of. My number 7 is Floristry, and the reason why this is on the list is because it is a hybrid digital game. Now, everybody at home, or a lot of people at home, are like, oh, Clutch Pearls.
Skip.
Yeah, exactly. So many board gamers really don't like having a disrupted cardboard experience with digital elements. But in this case, I think it's a worthy build because in this game, you are trying to create using very domino-esque style tiles. You're trying to collect and create this window arrangement of flowers. And there's a couple of things that's interesting about this, but at the core mechanic is an auction mechanic. And this is a 2-player only game. And so an auction mechanic is quite difficult to do. So what they've got is they have this Dutch style auction that is done via an app. And in this app, across 15 seconds, every 3 seconds, the price is dropping. And as the price is dropping, you can tap in to purchase at that price. And it also actually calculates how much money you have left. So that's all contained in the app. And then if you buy, of course, you get first pick of these domino style tiles, and then you're putting them together in a fairly abstract style game. The other element that I like about this game, though, is that because you're building out this very amorphous style puzzle with these domino pieces, you can actually move the frame around so that, the pattern that you're building out can become the top left corner or the bottom right corner, depending on how you want to build out that puzzle, but it still gives you that nice framing of what you're trying to achieve. So I really like that too. But ultimately, I feel like this game will probably be pretty straightforward, pretty quick, and may run its course fairly quickly as well. Now, I'm going to talk about my number 6 straight away because interestingly, I was reading about this app and I was like, that's really cool. I want to put it in my list because there's this app. And then I read about the announcement of the re-implementation of Rainer Knizia. He's back.
Oh, this year is going to be a big one.
The re-implementation of his game, Merchants of Amsterdam, which is coming back and being produced by Allplay as Merchants of Andromeda. So in this game, you play as space merchants. Essentially, I don't love the theme of space.
I love the merchant part.
Yeah, the merchant part, yes. The space part, no. But this does a similar thing because I didn't realize, but the Merchants of Amsterdam also had this type of timer that was a core part of this game. And can I add, this game came out 25 years ago.
Wow.
And there was a timer clock in this game that was a manual, spring-loaded, winded up, ticking back.
Yeah.
That people hated because it was really loud. And it reminded me of an old version that I have of Scattergories that had the same tick. And then at the end of the timer, it would click and it's so loud that everyone would often be like,
startled.
Oh, okay. But at least you know when the time is done. But anyway, so this timer would do the same thing as that in Floristry in that it's reducing the price. But it was always very clunky in that game because you had to place the timer somewhere where everybody could reach it. And so what they're developing now, Allplay is developing an app that has a similar function to the app of Floristry. I believe they're 2 completely separate apps. But essentially it's going to act like the, the app that people use for turn order, Choosy.
Yeah.
So everyone will have their finger on this, and actually it will be the people who are taking off their finger as well. So the last person in, I think, or something like that. So really interesting, but this game is a bit more complex than Floristry because I believe you're drafting cards and you get to keep one and then you get to discard one and then you get to auction one. So you're trying to look for something valuable that you can auction off in order to get money from other players. So, I'm intrigued to hear more. There's not a lot of information out about it yet, but Allplay do a fantastic job of the production value. And so, really excited to see what happens there. So that is both my number 7 and number 6 that both have this interesting auction digital mechanic.
So my number 6 is the game Ley Lines, which is actually a re-implementation of an older Wolfgang Kramer game called, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this, Asche? I apologize for butchering that pronunciation. So the previous game was about trucks and essentially like bidding for their cargo, and like it was a bit of pick up and deliver type game. And a lot of people really like it was well loved. But now it's being re-implemented and with new rules, and bringing Daryl Andrews, the designer of Sagrada, to like essentially revamp this new offering. And now it's in this world of magical, it's sort of like a magical kind of forest, and your merchants, which I love, as I alluded to before. So your merchants of magical goods and magical kind of resources for these fae markets. So you're going to be using a sort of dice placement that then determines the locations of how you're going to be moving through the forest to collect goods to then take to the market to sort of sell. And so that's the ley lines that you're kind of moving through. And so I think it's that optimizing the flow so that then you can obviously gather the right things, because there's also that economic thing of, you know, what's on demand. So then you're going to be able to make more gold or whatnot. So I love the sort of merchant type games. I love this new theme. And the artwork as well is I find quite appealing, that sort of like whimsy and sort of that element of magic. So yeah, quite excited for this one. So this is Ley Lines, my number 6.
For my number 5, I'm doing that thing that Maggie really hates, and I'm putting 2 in 1.
Oh no, it's so sneaky.
I know, well I could have
Is that cheating technically?
Well, maybe. But I could have done it with 7 and 6 because they both had the digital app. But, you know, they were a little bit different publishers and things, so I probably shouldn't do that.
Different games,
but these 2 are coming from a new line of games from Bitewing Games, which is called the Mythos Collection. And they're also both by the same designer. Reina Knizia is back. And
what is it the kids say? We're having a brat summer. I don't even know what that means. Hopefully it's nothing really bad. But yeah, so this year looks like it's going to be like the big Dr. Knizia year.
If it's gone to the point where we're saying it's no longer cool,
yeah,
so don't say anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, Reina Knizia has these 2 titles as part of the Mythos Collection. Actually, I think there's even more titles from Reina Knizia, but the 2 that I'm really intrigued by, the first is Iliad. And Iliad is a game, they're both 2-player only games, but Iliad is a tile placement game where you are trying to fill rows and columns. I just love rows and columns. But you're trying to fill rows and columns from the tiles that you have available to you, and I believe that's only ever 2 tiles at one time. So you're trying to decide where do you place this, and because these tiles are going to influence the row and the column, you've got to be careful about where you place it. But also the row or column scores when the person places the last tile in that row or column. So it's all about timing, and it's about trade-offs of placing a limited number of tiles that you have in different places that are going to either win you the favor of gods or not. And then, interestingly, when you win the favor of gods, you're trying to look for diversity in terms of the gods that you're winning favor with, because at the end of the game, ideally you want to have had favor with all 5 of the gods at the end. But in classic Reina Knizia style, there's also points in the game, but they will not matter unless someone doesn't meet that win condition. So if you meet that win condition, you win. But if you don't, well, then we're going to look at the points you have, and then it's only the highest, the highest scoring tile with each god that will actually score for you. So you've got to be thinking about like whether new tiles that you're collecting are actually going to be helpful in the end. So classic Reina Knizia with the wacky scoring.
Well, that's he's I believe I've seen interviews with him where he says that that's how he starts. Like when he's designing it, he starts with what's going to be interesting about the scoring and then work the way back.
Yeah. But I really like this because this is a brand new title from him. It's not a re-implementation of anything else. And I think it's like going to have that same intense feel as a lot of my favorite 2-player games, where it's really head to head and it's all about the trade-offs and things that you're willing to let go and things that you want to battle for, you know, like area control and that type of thing.
Well, see, I often don't do well with these ones. No. They bring out the worst in me. I'm like, I just don't want to feel like this, where like my entire purpose is to just take you down when it's like just that head to head. So we'll see. You never know.
Yeah, I'm not sure you're going to enjoy that one. But the second game is called Iker. And Iker, in some ways, I think you might like less because it feels even more abstract, but I think you might like the mechanic of what you're actually doing, because this looks like a checkers board, stay with me.
Oh boy.
Or a chessboard, where you have a row of, I don't know what they are. Maybe they're deities or gods or something.
Matter potentially.
But let's call them pawns. So in the second row, you've got this kind of group of pawns that you're going to be moving around, and when you move, you are leaving a trail of your colored tokens. And what you're trying to achieve is you're trying to drop all of your 14 tokens onto the board. And when you move a piece, you can move as far as you can until it gets blocked by another piece or a wall. So you can move all the way across the board and drop all of your color tokens, but then of course your opponent might move across the row and cover some of those up. And so it's this constant battle for who can kind of paint the board with their color, which I really love. Now that's the core like abstract puzzle, but then it's asymmetric in that there's, that each player has a number of cards in front of them that are one-off abilities that they can use across the course of the game. As you use that ability, you turn it over, never to be turned back again. And so both teams have both players have like quite strong abilities available to them. And they always recommend that when you play this game, you play 2 rounds, you play, one of each, so that in the second round, you know exactly what was used against you, and now you have the opportunity to use that yourself. So it seems like a really quick, 20 to 30 minute game. They both are going to scratch that itch of being like highly interactive and tense. Feels like they're both going to be those games where you play it once and then you lose and you're like, again, let's go.
Yeah. Well, sometimes they can be a hit. For me, I'm sort of thinking of like a Koali, which I really enjoy, where you're kind of doing that around the. So sometimes, you never know.
Who knows? We'll see. But yeah, I'm intrigued. So that is 2 games from the Mythos collection, Iliad and Ica.
Now, my number 5 is the game Panda Spin, which is a trick-taking and shedding game, which has really, really gorgeous foil art cards. And this is designed by Carl Chuddick, who did Innovation and Glory to Rome, which are just like incredibly clever and usually wacky card games. So obviously very, very strong with card game design. But this one as a trick-taking and shedding game, what's interesting about it is you have these cards with like these pandas on them, and they're kind of double-headed. So they have 2 sides. They have like a basic, I think it's like orange side. And as you're playing, just like a shedding game, you can play either singles or different kind of melds of multiples of a kind or sequences. And then you can also do this like double sequence. So it's like essentially consecutive numbers, but it's like pair and a pair of consecutive numbers. So it's like an interesting sort of thing. But the way it kind of works is if you win, you get to get rid of those cards. So it's just like if you win that sort of round, meaning everyone else passes and you're like, yeah. So obviously that's the shedding element. If you completely shed out, then you're going to get bamboo. So this whole thing is about, it's almost like it's a race to 20 bamboo. You're going to get 1 bamboo for every card that the player with the most cards ends up having. If you lose, so every time you kind of lose, you don't get to shed out, but you actually get to swap the card to its upgraded side. So the upgraded side, which I think is like the blue side, is usually going to be stronger and often will have bamboo on it. So it's like when you're playing them, you might actually be collecting bamboo along the way. So the other interesting thing is when you're playing, if you ever play and you play, even if you lose, but you had at least 1 card of the upgraded side, then that allows you to also like get rid of that whole hand. But then the final kind of tricky thing about this is, yes, you're going to be, you're going to be collecting all this bamboo. Again, remember, it's a race to 20 through either completely shedding out or showing out, I think they call it in the game, or playing those kind of upgraded bamboo cards. There's also other different like abilities as well. Like when you play them, you get to kind of steal bamboo. I think it's like one of the, like a hungry panda that kind of steals bamboo from other players. But the final 20th bamboo can't just be gathered like that. It has to be won by shedding out. So there's one element of kind of that race of collecting that bamboo, but then also having a really great final round. Like you have to sort of skill out that final round. So I remember we kind of played a quick demo of this.
Yeah, we got a demo of this at Gen Con
last year. And I was like, I really enjoyed it. So,
and I was really confused.
Yeah, I tend to be weirdly the one that really resonates with the shedding games, even though often they don't have any kind of thing. Yeah,
they really take me a second. But I think it's also the rotation of the cards because I I think Maggie's much more instinctive as a player, and so can probably take it at its face value. Whereas I'm looking at the other side of the card and thinking about like in 5 steps ahead, like what would flipping that mean for me? And it just like it blows my mind. It's like too much. Anyway.
Whereas I just play for the present. So it's like I'm just playing for this round, this trick, and then we'll see what happens. And so I'm just like, yay!
It is super intriguing though. I want to play it more.
And beautiful cards in production. So that's my number 5, Panda Spin.
Okay, so my number 4, another 2-player head-to-head game. Can you believe it? This is almost like most anticipated 2-player games at this point.
But it's going to be the year for it.
It is going to be the year for it. This game is by a designer named Andreas Stedding, who is the designer of Gugong back in the day, as well as Hansa Teutonica, which of course is a Euro that lots of people really enjoy. And this is a much smaller game because it's a 2-player smaller box head-to-head. And I love the premise of this game because this game takes place in Germany, and it's back when the city of Hamburg was a flourishing city. It had lots of industry, really popular, and then there was a little fishing village called Altona. And Hamburg thought nothing of Altona because, it was this great city. And then all of a sudden, Altona started to become more and more popular, and this rivalry developed between the two cities. Now, of course, that is all history because actually now Altona is part of a borough of Hamburg, of the city of Hamburg.
So you're saying it got acquired, essentially? It's like, it's no threat. It's like, maybe it's a threat. We'll acquire it. Let's just merge.
I think as Hamburg, grew bigger and bigger,
makes sense.
they're actually quite, close to each other, obviously, because now it's like a suburb of Hamburg, but and a really nice suburb at that. And apparently at the suburb, we haven't been there, even though we've spent a weird amount of time in Hamburg. But apparently there is an old fish market there that you can go and visit. So it was this old fishing village. Anyway, this is the setting of the game, which I like much more than some of the other 2-player like gods and space and those kind of themes.
So it's fighting villages.
This is fighting villages.
Over tourism or just like popularity?
Well, this is the
What's
thing.
the name of the game?
They're rival cities.
Rival cities.
There is no information about this game really at all. However, to get to my number 4, there were 2 things mentioned in the BGG page. 1, there is only 1 mechanic mentioned, and it's a rondelle. And you know how I love a rondelle. So that was a big tick. And then there was a line in the BGG entry that is a very confrontational experience.
Oh my goodness. Confrontational rondelles.
Yeah.
That's intriguing indeed.
I know. But
I don't like confrontational, but I'm intrigued by how do you make that rondelle. Yeah, okay.
I like both of those things.
You do.
And so I'm really excited by it. I have nothing else to tell you about it except for that it's coming out this year and I will be anticipating it. So it is my number 4 rival cities.
Now, my number 4 is the game Vineyard, a winemaking game by designer Roberta Taylor, who you may know from games like Creature Comforts, Maple Valley, and more recently Cafe Barras, which was...
You love.
I love. That was my number 1 game of the year for the small box games. And I feel like Roberta Taylor's skills in design are kind of getting better with time, just like aging a good wine, which is the theme of this game. So it's a winemaking game where you're going to be, doing the whole winemaking thing of, I imagine, collecting your kind of the grapes and then aging, and then you're also going to be specializing along the way, which I think is going to then give you particular skills, but then also there's key goals and objectives that you're going to be trying to reach. The main intriguing thing about this is the core mechanic is this sort of shared worker placement thing, which is all about the workers. No one really owns the workers. Every player can move all the workers. So it becomes this sort of thing of timing where you're moving workers to then hope that by the time it kind of comes to your turn, you can take a particularly strong action in one of the locations on the board. But again, because anyone can use any of those workers at those locations, things are going to be sort of changing the state of the game. But there's also this sort of element of like you have, it's all, what do you call it? When you have complete information. So it's not like, oh, all of a sudden you're going to be surprised by some random thing. So yeah, that's all I know about the game. The actual, I really enjoyed the kind of winemaking as a theme.
I mean, viticulture is one of our all-time favorite games.
Absolutely. So then, and Roberta Taylor, and also this game plays in about an hour. So again, I love those experiences where you can kind of get something that's sort of strategic and satisfying, but just, it's not gonna be hours and hours spending on the table. So yeah, that is my number 4 Vineyard, a winemaking game.
Now, my number 3 is a game called La Patisserie Rococo. So yes, this is the follow-up title to Rococo, which is an older Euro that was then brought back as a deluxe edition, which we have and we love. And again, in O'Toole art, beautiful.
That was great.
And so the same designers actually created another game which was on, I believe it was on crowdfunding as a cookie kind of theme game, like as in you were making cookies and selling cookies. And Eagle Griffin decided to kind of cancel that because people weren't resonating with the art. And then they brought it back with this Rococo theme. And I'm excited by that because with Rococo, I got to pretend like I had some kind of creative ability to be a seamstress, which I absolutely do not.
Can't even make the first stitch.
I can't even put a button on anything.
Neither of us. Like, no. So we're like,
terrible.
It's like we have to wait until we're around your mom.
Yeah.
To like, can you fix this?
Help.
Let's go to a tailor.
So now I get to pretend like I can bake. And that's another thing I'm not very good at as well. I can cook.
Yeah.
But baking is a whole other ball game because it's really about precision. I'm much more of an instinctive
Which is weird because in gaming you're different. Like I'm actually really good at baking because I love just following those rules.
So weird.
That's weird. But then in gaming, I'm instinctive and I...
So would you say that in cooking I'm a themer?
Apparently.
You're the thinker. Anyway, okay, back to the game. So it's actually really similar to Rococo in the way that it plays, but it's the amalgamation of the designers' 3 different games that they're bringing into one. And of course now the theme is very much in line with, the world of Rococo. But one thing that they found frustrating about their design, Rococo, is that there's only 28 employee cards. And so after a while, those employee cards start to feel a bit similar, which I can relate to, that is true. And they are the main engine of like how you get actions done in the game. And so you want a bit more variety there. So I think there's now 70 plus cards and they are also 2 different types as well. And the way you draft them is different as well because you're going to always get 2 new cards and then you're going to discard 1 every turn as well. So you are drafting those and then kind of picking one and handing your hand to the next player. So everyone gets to draft these and there's 2 different types and one draft is going to the left and one draft is going to the right. So you're always going to get these new cards and these cards are going to give you upgraded opportunities to play out different actions in the game. And of course, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get ingredients so that you can bake delicious products.
Yeah.
And so you're going to be doing that. But the idea behind this game is always to try and optimize your turns because what you want to be doing is playing out both actions on your turn on the card rather than just, doing one every turn. So you're trying to work out the best way to optimize your timing to get more things done. I really loved Rococo. What's interesting is that Rococo I always found to be a very, not entry level, but like definitely at that Gateway Plus level where our friends who had never played any Euro style games could really get into it because of the heavy theming, which made it more intuitive and because it was so beautiful, especially that deluxe edition. And so this, interestingly, seems more like a streamlined game. It's shorter in length than Rococo, but the weight is actually a bit higher, the indicated weight that they've put on it.
Okay.
So you're still getting that crunchy experience, but in more of a 90-minute package instead of a 2.5 hour kind of package. So intrigued. I really want to find out more. I don't know actually if it's already now been to crowdfunding in its new form or if it's maybe it's live now. Anyway, I'm excited to try this out. That is La Patisserie Rococo, my number 3.
Okay, so my number 3 is the game Tea Witches, which is by designer Manny Vega, who did Flamecraft, and the artist is Sandara Tang, who also did Flamecrafting and Critter Kitchen. Love that aesthetic. And so this is all about you are serving tea during the Tequinox Fair to witches. And so you are going to be sending your teapots, and I haven't seen photos or images of this, but it sounds cute, and the only image that I can see is just the cover, which I'm like, yes, I am in. just the theme alone and this sort of artwork alone, I'm like, I can't wait to play this game. So you're sending your teapops out to collect resources and to attract celebrities. So like I said, sort of
So many puns.
So many puns. But yeah, so you're attracting the sort of celebrity witches as well. And then so there's an element of, it sort of sounds like it's one of those games where there's like different faces. So there's that kind of attracting customer witches faces, but there's an element of push your luck where if you have one type of witch and you kind of keep recruiting or attracting, and then you get the same type of witch, they cancel each other out, they put a hex on each other, and so you lose them both. So it's, yeah, I always enjoy, again, that push your luck.
I know,
sort of
I was just thinking, again,
yeah.
There it is.
And then ultimately you're going to be trying to obviously, you also like improve your hut so you can serve, you know, I imagine more complex recipes or products, and then ultimately obviously recipe fulfillment, so providing those, the things that the witches are going to, the teas, brewing the teas that the witches are going to want, which will give you prestige points. And obviously whoever has the most prestige will be the winner. But I just love, this is my kind of sort of cozy setting that I love to play.
It's like it was made for you.
Yeah, so I can't wait, and it just looks so adorable, even though I only have one image to go by. But I'm super excited. So this is Tea, which is my number 3.
So my number 2 should come as no surprise to people, because really the original game is one of our all-time favorites.
So it's my number 10 as well.
Oh yeah, your number 10. Yes. So that's why Great Western Trail El Paso is my number 2, Maggie's number 10. We absolutely love the Great Western Trail series, and I was really excited to hear that they were bringing out a shorter version of the game. And by shorter, it's 60 to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's not absolutely short, but it is much shorter than getting the full any one of the Great Western Trail trilogy out to the table. And because it is such a big teach and a big experience, it is rare that we get it to the table, but we both just love the mechanics of Great Western Trail so much. Now, this game is actually not designed by Alexander Pfister, the original designer, but actually has been who probably, was part of the development process.
It's listed as he's listed as a co-designer.
Yeah. But the main designer is actually Johannes Krenner, who was the designer of the game Challenges, so that 2-player like head-to-head battle game, but also most recently Flip Fate. What's the name of the
Washed Ashore.
Washed Ashore, but actually there's
which is a solo game.
It is a solo game, but there's another one coming out this year as well, another Flip Fate, which is a really clever choose your own adventure style solo game. So intrigued that he is the designer of this, because that was those two are much lighter experiences. This is obviously in the Great Western Trail spirit, still quite a complex Euro style game, and there are many retained elements of Great Western Trail. So everything about the DNA of this is very Great Western Trail. You're still going through a rondelle, and this rondelle is of course leading you to El Paso now, and you are still collecting cattle, and you still want to have that differentiation of cattle as you go through the rondelle. You're still building buildings, but now the buildings are all kind of shared buildings, and then you can put your little token on them to show that they're now your building, instead of having to need all those additional components per player.
That's good.
And there's still workers as well, so hiring different workers, but those are in the form of cards now instead of tiles. And you still even get a mini little player board, much smaller than the original, but still you are unlocking different things on that player board. So there's a lot of the same DNA here, but they've obviously tried to streamline the game.
Like the travel edition.
I wouldn't go
not
that
quite.
far.
It's not like magnetic things that you can take on a train or anything like that. There will be trains, but don't take it on a train, because I don't think you'll have the table.
But I think what's interesting about this game is there's also like a solo version, which the original had solo as well, but this solo is named Sue, which immediately made me think of that movie with Demi Moore, The Substance. So I was like, Sue! Yeah. But anyway, I don't think
it's that Sue.
No, I hope it's not.
There's no aerobics going on in this.
But, having a solo version of a much bigger game experience, but in a game that can be set up much quicker than Great Western Trail, because you like the solo of Great Western Trail, but it's such a beast.
Particularly in New Zealand, because New Zealand is the one of the 3 that I enjoy the most in terms of it just sort of all the thing. And I really enjoy the solo, but that is a beast to put out to set up onto the table.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people will love this. I can't wait to try it. It is my number 2 and Maggie's number 10, Great Western Trail El Paso.
Now for my number 2 is the game Vantage being brought to you by Stonemaier Games, but specifically it's designed by Jamie Stegmaier, who obviously runs and owns Stonemaier Games, but often particularly a lot of the more recent titles haven't been designed by him. And the games that have been designed by him have actually been the ones that have hit the most for us. So things like Viticulture and things like Scythe, Tapestry. So I particularly connect with his designs. Now this is interesting because this is a cooperative, open world, like sandbox type world where you're going to be essentially discovering. There's a lot of exploration. There's not a lot of information around the game.
No.
But even so, that one of the entries in BGG, like in terms of like the families that this game belongs to, needs more details in the script, which I found amusing. But the whole concept of this is you're all kind of start scattered in different, like obviously if you're playing solo, I don't know how that's going to work, but if it's multiple players, because it plays up to 6, you start scattered in different parts of the world, and you're going to have this up to almost 800 interconnected locations. And the whole thing is that you're able to kind of communicate with one another, but you only have access to your vantage points, almost like the things that you can see from your place or location. And so apparently it's got like 400 different cards with like 900 discoverable content type cards. And having said that, because it's like, wow, it sounds like such a massive experience, it's not a campaign. So it is sort of standalone games that will play, between, I think it's like 90 minutes to 2 hours, I believe this is sort of the time for it. And there's no expansions. So it's like the only thing is sort of like kind of deluxeified components if you want. So I'm really intrigued at how this is going to work. And the thing that I was so drawn to with this is I often will have an idea of like, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a game that does this sort of thing? And one of those was like this sort of completely open world place where you're just sort of exploring, and this is probably the proposal that seems to most closely capture that vague idea or wish. It's like I just put it out into the world, and Jamie's like, okay, I think I got you.
Okay, which I'm super intrigued by, because I would say Jamie's design DNA is really around structure and levers. And, he loves a track. He loves like this then influences that. I find his way of thinking very pragmatic and very thinker-like. And so the concept of him developing like an open world cooperative style game totally intrigues me. It almost made my list just because I want to see how that plays out. Yeah. But reality is that's not my preferred style of gaming. That's much more Maggie's.
I will say actually probably the closest design to this is Charterstone. So we actually did play Charterstone. That was a campaign game, and that is the one that had that kind of discoverable content along the way. And it didn't actually resonate as much with us as playing it as a group. But then that one wasn't cooperative, that's competitive.
Yeah, but I would argue that game is not very open. It's still like going out to get resources, come back, to do things. It's very structured.
It is,
very structured.
But interestingly, even with that one, I loved playing it online. So I actually with the app, like I would play it by myself, like all the time. I haven't more recently because obviously, life and time. So many games. But so I'm intrigued that it's like, ooh, this is sort of like an evolution of a little bit of that. So that is my number 2 Vantage.
And my number 1 most anticipated game of 2025 is going to surprise everybody, I think, because
I don't even know what it is. What is your number 1?
You don't know? Yeah, we didn't pay much attention to each ot's list before we sat down to film. Yeah. But I think the only way to cap off my list is with a 2-player game by Reina Knizia.
Oh yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, it is the year for that. And my number 1 game is the Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation.
Oh,
now,
yes.
If you've seen me ever at a flea market, at a convention, so whether that's like Gen Con, Dice Tower West, you often see me buying a lot of games because I love shopping for games.
It's a weakness.
But that is my grail game. I am always looking for that game. That is the one that I go in there hoping to find, and I have never found it. So it's been out of print for a long time. It's a 2-player head-to-head 30-minute game where it is set in the world of the Lord of the Rings. And if you watched our recent trick-taking Lord of the Rings video, you'll know that I do not resonate with that IP at all. And in this game, I'm going to butcher this completely. One player is playing as Sauron. that I assume the baddies that are trying to get the ring back to use or to leverage for their own gain, whereas you've got the Fellowship of the Ring who are trying to destroy the ring, etc. So you're both playing these asymmetric factions, and then it's kind of like, I don't know, like it feels like chess-like with cards that have different abilities, and by all accounts, people say that this is one of their favorite two-player games. So for that reason, for many, many years, it's always been on my want to play list. And in fact, I've never even had someone who owns it that could teach it to me so I could assess it for myself. And so it's coming back, and it's coming back under a new publisher. But this publisher was established by someone who worked on the game at Fantasy Flight Games. And so has always loved the game and is lovingly kind of bringing it back to life as an ultimate edition that people will now be able to get their hands on. And so it hasn't even crowdfunded yet. I hope that this is a game that, you know, does turn up in 2025. It might be pushing it a little bit if it hasn't crowdfunded yet. But yeah, I'm just excited to get the opportunity to play this.
Finally.
Yeah. And it's not even, the IP, it's just Reina Knizia, 2-player head-to-head, you know, and I just want, it's just, you know, it's one of those things. And can it even live up to the expectations in my mind?
Maybe it's not you've hyped it up too much in your mind.
Yeah,
it's impossible for it to live up to your own
build up. Yeah. I don't know if it'll even make my top games of the year, but I do feel like I'm talking about anticipation, and I've anticipated this for years.
I mean, it's been your grail game.
Yeah, I think
has. The grail game, I think, for you. Yeah.
So now, this is my number one most anticipated game of 2025, Lord of the Rings, The Confrontation, the Ultimate Edition.
And finally, my number one is a game that I don't think I've ever been this hyped for a game, which again, just like you, I feel like it's sort of setting it up to fail because I'm like overhyping in my mind, is the game Spiritfire, which is being created by Orange Nebula, who did Vindication and Unsettled. And so this team obviously has, you know, great chops behind them. And the whole purpose of this project is that this is the sort of like open world exploration of not necessarily an external narrative, but it's like an internal journey. So it's like into the development of the character, saying like you are the story. So and there's no combat. So all the conflict and the pressure is, it's a sort of, and again, like a lot of the descriptions are kind of vague and mysterious, so I can't give you a lot more, but I'm already kind of like, oh, what is it? So it's all about that sort of internal kind of reflection and internal struggles to eventually kind of have this flourishing, I guess, or blossoming. It is you can either play it solo or cooperative, and interestingly, you can drop in and out. So it is sort of a story campaign, like a story, like a longer type game where you will be developing your character. You start by creating the character, and then as you're going through the different experiences, your deck that you're playing with will also be developing. But then you have this mechanic where if you wanted to all of a sudden, you know, I've been playing for a while and now I want to play with Amy, although she rarely wants to co-op play with me, you can just have this drop in and out where people can just kind of drop in and play a couple of games with their character of whatever level they are, and then drop out and you kind of keep going on your adventure, which I love. Like that's such a cool concept of going, oh no, we always need to have the same group of people in order to be, it's like, no, like, you know,
join the reality adventure. Is you'll probably play this solo. Like I feel like you're most excited to play this 100%.
Solo. Well, yeah, so we'll see.
Well, when it went to crowdfunding, I remember because I saw the crowdfunding page before Maggie had seen it. And as I read it, I was like, oh my goodness, this game sounds like it was made specifically for Maggie. And Maggie, I think it was like a few days before or the week before, had said, I wish a game existed like this. And it was literally the top line of this game.
Yeah. And so like that's both my number one and number two are both games that I feel like I just sort of put the wish out into the universe. And then Orange Nebula and like Jamie were like, we gotcha. Like, here's our take on that wish that you put out. So it must have been like, because obviously those games had already been under development, so I didn't come up with it. I can't take the credit for putting that out there. I think I probably just tapped into the collective unconscious that was like, these games are happening. I'm like, yeah, I would really like to explore that. So that is my number one most anticipated. It's Spiritfire.
And that is our top 10 most anticipated board games of the year for 2025. This list will evolve and change because things get announced, like mid-year, things get announced for Gen Con and Essen in particular. So this is always changing. But right now, with the information we have, those are the games that we're most interested in. Are any that were on our list on your list? We'd love to hear from you in the comments below about what you're most excited for this year. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.